In this third and final part of the timeline of events associated with the Lucy Letby case, we're going to examine what occurred in the police investigation of the situation at the Council of Chester. This is a continuation of the first two parts of this series that you can see on the screen now: Lucy Letby, the truth about Dr. Brearey and full timeline, and the truth about the Lucy Letby Hospital and timeline 2015 to 2017. In these first two videos, we looked at what occurred behind the scenes at the Council of Chester, and in this video, we're going to examine the police investigation. 18th of July 2016. Legal representative Corinne Slingo had told numerous key personnel from the Council of Chester, including lawyer Ian Pace, who will become significant imminently, several important things. The only current evidence of any clinical concern is the potentially circumstantial fact that one particular nurse was on shift on more occasions than others at the point when neonatal deaths arose. There are also deaths and deteriorations that occurred when Lucy was not on shift. No incidents have been linked to her practice. No previous concerns or whistleblowing has arisen in respect of the individual or the unit. There is currently no cause of death or thematic clinical basis to suggest the deaths are connected to each other or connected by a common intervention, whether deliberate or not. Approximately 75% of the deaths have also been through the coronial system, with no common feature or issue arising from the individual's care. There does not currently appear to be any reason to formally alert the police to these issues, as there is nothing upon which one might reasonably base a suspicion of a criminal offence having been committed. There is a likelihood that, having changed the admissions criteria to remove the highest risk of sub-32-week neonates, that the mortality rate will drop significantly in any event, and that could easily be interpreted as being due to the removal of the individual as the timescales coincide. That may make life much more difficult for her and also for the Trust in trying to identify the true cause of the spike in mortality for this group of babies. On the same day, the 18th of July 2016, lawyer Ian Pace wrote to the HR Director of the Council of Chester, Sue Hodkinson. In this email, the following statement was made: "The Trust now want to consider redeploying Lucy to another area of the Trust, pending further investigations on the unit. The evidence does not at the moment say that it is her, and this will only become clear pending completion of the internal review." We will be discussing that internal review later in this timeline. The line manager and deputy director of nursing had held a meeting with Lucy. They framed the meeting on the basis that they wanted to provide her with support and arrange for her to continue working on the unit with close clinical supervision. Ian Pace explained that if we are holding a meeting with Lucy and her RCN representative, then we should explain the reasons for the change. We may also want to refer to the fact that this action is being taken not only in the interest of patient safety, which of course is critical, but also protect Lucy's position going forward. I explained that we should explain that this is a completely neutral act and is being taken to allow a preliminary investigation to be undertaken on the ward. It was my view that, provided we can show we've genuinely applied our minds to the decision as to redeployment, and we can show that this is justified in the circumstances, then I would expect that the prospects of a constructive unfair dismissal claim on this basis alone would be defendable. Now, I want people to remember that because Ian Pace will change his opinion on that pretty rapidly. I explained to Sue that even if the claim for constructive unfair dismissal was successful, this would be capped compensation. Sue confirmed that Lucy had been employed by the Trust for over 2 years. I explained that this is a Band 6, which she confirmed, and roughly speaking, the compensatory award would be capped at about, the figure has been redacted, being a rough calculation of her annual salary, which we would confirm later, plus a basic award. 28th of October 2016. Ian Pace writes a note based on a telephone conversation with Sue Hodkinson, which includes the following information. The draft external review has now been concluded. This review criticised the hospital for not entering into a full process based on the various allegations that had been raised. It also criticised the Trust for not telling Lucy the comments and allegations that were raised at the time. There is no suggestion in the external review that Lucy was involved, simply referring to clinicians having a gut feel. There is a significant amount that needs to be done regarding staffing to reinstate the unit back to its previous standard. Failings found in terms of neonatal network, it will remain the same level for some time. Indeed, just to provide a bit of commentary on that, it's still at the same level today. Lucy still may resign and claim constructive dismissal because we have excluded her from her duty. This type of claim will be capped unless she can show there is a whistleblowing element to it, in which case exposure would be unlimited. I said that overall, bearing in mind her salary, the financial exposure isn't all too great for a constructive unfair dismissal only claim. On balance, the Trust would rather this than potential patient safety issues and the reputation impact this would have. So what Ian Pace is saying here is we'd rather have Lucy go for constructive dismissal than have a load of parents sue us. 14th of February 2017. Ian Harvey informed Dr. Jane Horden that in citing the reduction in deaths after downgrading, the consultants are being selective and disingenuous in that there is no comparison between the intensity of the workload before and after we downgraded the unit, and we believe that they are trying to suggest that the only significant change has been reassigning the member of staff, which we did to protect that member. 3rd of April 2017. Stephen Cross, Director of Legal Services and Head of Corporate Affairs at the hospital, had written that, in our view, there is no evidence to justify a criminal investigation. 13th of April 2017. An extraordinary board meeting at the Council of Chester asserted that neither the Royal College Review or Dr. Horden's review identified any criminal issues. 2nd of May 2017. Tony Chambers, Chief Executive at the Council of Chester, wrote to Cheshire Police Chief Constable Simon Byrne asking the constabulary to conduct a forensic investigation into the circumstances surrounding the deaths at the hospital with a view to excluding any unnatural causes. 4th of May 2017. In an internal email, Dr. Ravi Jayaram mentioned that it would be important for the police to have their interest piqued. 5th of May 2017. At the culmination of this police document, which commences Operation Hummingbird, there is a brief mention of the purported statistical relationship between Lucy and collapses on the unit before this bold statement is made. There is no evidence other than coincidence. 8th of May 2017. Senior Coroner's Officer Stephanie Davies, who had been assigned to work on the case, completed her review citing missing jigsaw pieces in some of the cases, but no evidence of malfeasance. Based on information that has since come to light, Stephanie now considers this case to be a miscarriage of justice. If you look for the interview with Stephanie that I conducted, then you can hear a lot more about her opinion on this case and what occurred in May when she did her review. 10th of May 2017. Dr. Ravi Jayaram corresponds with Nigel Wenham of the Cheshire Constabulary in order to arrange what he describes as a meeting at Blacon Police Station. This is initially arranged to be a meeting with just Dr. Jayaram, with no other representatives from the Council of Chester in attendance. 10th of May 2017. On the same day, a document entitled Reasons for Concerns Regarding a Possible Criminal Cause for Increased Neonatal Mortality at the Council of Chester, June 2015 to July 2016, is distributed to Cheshire Police. This document is notable today for the misleading and poorly founded nature of its content. 12th of May 2017. The Cheshire Constabulary meet with Tony Chambers, Ian Harvey and Stephen Cross, all executives from the Council of Chester. The following conclusions are drawn. Cheshire Constabulary are not clinical experts, something of an understatement. Any reports or information that is presented that may potentially constitute as evidence for criminal offence, then as soon as that threshold is met, it will be picked up as a criminal investigation. It does not feel like this stage is being met at present. At this stage, the Council of Chester have exhausted all lines possible, and there is nothing that could potentially be evidence of a criminal investigation. The concerns raised by the consultants have been raised previously, and there is nothing they are aware of that would consider or believe that potential criminal offences may have been committed. Darren Martland from Cheshire Police stated that at present there does not appear to be any evidence of a criminal wrongdoing from the reports and reviews which would warrant a police-led criminal investigation. 15th of May 2017. What was initially arranged as a meeting between Dr. Jayaram and Cheshire Police becomes a meeting with Dr. Stephen Brearey, Dr. Jayaram and Cheshire Police. So Dr. Stephen Brearey simply invites himself to this meeting. The pair of consultants then proceed to seed the police with information of varying degrees of accuracy, much of it inaccurate. 18th of May 2017. There are then no further internal documents available in Thirlwall from Cheshire Police, but already by the 18th of May they have informed the Guardian newspaper that they are now treating the deaths on the unit as suspicious. Just 6 days previously, prior to the intervention of Dr. Brearey and Dr. Jayaram, Cheshire Police saw no reason to investigate and no evidence of any wrongdoing. According to the latest version of events given by Dr. Dewi Evans, he read about the issue at the Countess of Chester in The Guardian on what is presumed to be this date. It should be noted that Dr. Evans has given a different account of events on more than one previous occasion. Also in May 2017, and presumably after the 18th of May, Dr. Evans engages in email correspondence with the National Crime Agency, opining that the situation in Chester seems to be his kind of case. Dr. Evans has denied the fact that he was attempting to insert himself into the process. 10th of July 2017. Based on documents that I have now seen, it is clear that Dr. Evans meets with Cheshire Police in July 2017 for the first time. An approximate date for this meeting is the 10th of July 2017. Within minutes of walking into the police station, Dr. Evans has already informed Cheshire Police that there is definitely inflicted harm in these cases. July 2017 onwards. After everything that has occurred previously, the Cheshire Constabulary then actively involves Dr. Stephen Brearey and Dr. Ravi Jayaram in the selection of cases for the investigation. This was known already, but has recently been confirmed in the email correspondence between Peter Elston and Dr. Dewi Evans. This is particularly significant as it is Dr. Stephen Brearey who ultimately identifies the Inchelling cases that will be central to the indictment. This has been confirmed in interviews with both Vanity Fair and The Observer. Such was the important role of the consultants in the police investigation, they were described by Paul Hughes of Cheshire Police as the golden thread in the investigation. This follows a period where Dr. Brearey in particular was the ringleader of a 2-year campaign against Lucy Letby. Brearey and Jayaram are then the primary instigators of the police investigation, involved in the investigation itself, find the critical Inchelling cases and then give evidence against Lucy Letby in court. 3rd of July 2018. Lucy Letby is arrested for the first time and taken to Blacon Police Station near Chester. Dr. Evans has repeatedly claimed that he didn't know the name of Lucy Letby when he wrote his initial reports. However, he filed multiple reports after Lucy Letby was arrested. This arrest was publicised, and Evans definitely knew the name of Lucy Letby at this point, although there is also evidence that the names of nurses and doctors were all over the notes that he initially examined anyway. At some point in 2019, after the initial arrest of Lucy Letby, Dr. Evans filed a new report on Child P. It hasn't been possible to determine the exact date of this report, but he files multiple reports when knowing the name of Lucy Letby in the years to follow. Later in 2019, Dr. Evans files a report on Child O, and then we can go through the precise dates of every other report that was filed. I should emphasise at this point, these are just the reports that we know about. It's possible that he filed other reports that haven't turned up yet or that haven't been included in court reporting because we don't have the full police transcripts of the court case. But we'll go through them. 17th of January 2019, Dr. Evans files a new report on Child N. 24th of March 2019, Dr. Evans files a new report on Child G. 25th of March 2019, Dr. Evans files a new report on child I. 26th of March 2019, Dr. Evans files a new report on child C. 3rd of June 2019, Dr. Evans files a new report on child A. Also on the 3rd of June 2019, Dr. Evans files a new report on child B. On the 18th of October 2020, Dr. Evans files yet another report on child A. Also on the 18th of October 2020, Dr. Evans files a further report on child B. On the 24th of June 2021, Dr. Evans files another report on child N. Also on the 24th of June 2021, Dr. Evans files another report on child I. On the 17th of October 2021, Dr. Evans files yet another report on child G. On the 19th of October 2021, Dr. Evans files yet another report on child C. On the 19th of October 2021, Dr. Evans files yet another report on child I. On the 21st of October 2021, Dr. Evans files further reports on child N, child I, and child G. On the 29th of October 2021, Dr. Evans files further reports on child C and child I. On the 14th of April 2022, Dr. Evans files yet another report on child I. On the 22nd of April 2022, Dr. Evans files yet another report on child G. On the 14th of September 2022, Dr. Evans incredibly files yet another report on child G. And then on the 1st of November 2022, during the court case itself, Dr. Evans files yet another report on child C. And then in 2023 onwards, there have been further reports filed by Dr. Evans after the conviction of Lucy Letby that have relevance to at least 3 infants in the case. The full scale of these reports is not known. As mentioned, these are only the reports that I've been able to corroborate. Considering the lack of transparency from the criminal justice system, there could be other reports that exist. So that takes us right back from 2015 up to the present day. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to reflect on this timeline and explain some of the key themes. Before I do that, I just want to mention that the visual timelines that you will see on the screen during this section were produced by my friend Catherine, so I'm very grateful for that. In the first part of this series, we looked at the efforts of Dr. Stephen Brearey, in particular to have Lucy Letby removed from the neonatal unit. One of the key aspects of this is that Dr. Brearey became suspicious about Lucy Letby or seemed fixated with her at an extraordinarily early juncture in proceedings. We then see an enormous amount of effort being invested in removing Lucy from the unit, even though there is no evidence of wrongdoing. It's clear that Dr. Brearey was a ringleader among the consultants and made significant efforts to ensure that they came on board with him. Dr. Ravi Jayaram was the most obvious supporter, but it's very clear that Dr. Brearey was the instigator of this. I don't have a good explanation for why this happened. We've discussed this in previous videos, and I've discussed it in the comments section with people as well, and I've had many conversations with other people outside this YouTube channel. There are several possible reasons, and all of those can collectively be part of the explanation, but ultimately, I don't know why Dr. Brearey became so fixated with Lucy. I don't think he deliberately targeted her. And there are many reasons for that I believe this, but another one came to mind recently while I was walking Kiko. I think that if this had been a deliberate targeting and deliberate scapegoating, why would you write all this stuff down? There is so much stuff written down here, and I've not even presented most of it. There are many, many other documents that can't make the final cut of either this video or my book because it would just go on forever. I don't even know if I'll ever be able to go over them because there's so much, way more than is presented in these videos, with a lot of these subtler points have been cut out. These are just the key documents that are the most explicit. There are many, many other things going on behind the scenes that I haven't reported. So I would find it extraordinary if someone was deliberately targeting another member of staff and at the same time they were allowing this enormous paper trail to be created. Of course, it has been created, and now it's been released to some extent by the Thirlwell inquiry. I suspect there are further materials at the Thirlwell inquiry that we don't know about, but we do know quite a lot. After Lucy is removed from the unit, we then have this grievance procedure, which is quite extensive, very independent, a lot of investigation, a lot of interviews, and this quite clearly vindicates her. All 7 points of this grievance procedure are upheld. Dr. Chris Green is actually very critical of the consultants, saying, in a particularly notable comment, he says that it's likely that they lied. And at this point, we see the hospital speaking openly about Lucy going for constructive dismissal. In fact, they think it's favourable for Lucy to go for constructive dismissal rather than face legal action from some of the parents. If Lucy had gone for constructive dismissal, it's very doubtful that I would be sitting here right now, in my opinion. The consultants would realistically have had to abandon their efforts to scapegoat Lucy and deal with the reality that the grievance procedure had been fully upheld. As it was, Lucy wanted to go back on the unit and perhaps rather naively believed that she could somehow mend her working relationships. It's a crying shame she didn't go for a grievance procedure, because I really believe I wouldn't be sitting here now, because I think the grievance procedure wasn't even defendable. In Ian Pace's, in his second letter, in the first letter he says, I still think it's defendable. In the second letter he doesn't even mention that. He just says, look, it'll be this amount of compensation and that would be a good result for us. It's a shame that Lucy went down the route that she did. I understand she was a young woman, perhaps a little idealistic. She'd just moved into a new house. She was passionate about her career. She had a strong support group in Chester. She was close to people on the unit. And I do understand all of these things. But ultimately, once someone has accused you, a work colleague has accused you, in fact, of attempting to murder anyone, let alone babies, let alone multiple babies, you cannot go back into that workplace. And I can say very confidently that I wouldn't. I wouldn't consider it to be safe, and also I don't want to be around people like that, and I just wouldn't accept those kind of accusations. I would have gone after the hospital and made sure that I got out of there. Unfortunately, Lucy didn't take that path, so we'll have to deal with that. At the same time the grievance procedure is going on, we then have the material that I covered in the second half, or the second portion of this timeline, which essentially points to all of the enormous mistakes, problems, issues, and poor sanitary conditions at the hospital. There's so much of this that, again, I couldn't fit all this into one video. I can't fit it all in my book. I've got as much into the book as I possibly can. I covered as much in these videos as was feasible. There's even more than this going on behind the scenes, but there is so much information pointing to serious problems that you just can't cover it. You can't cover it in its totality. I mean, I think I've got all the themes in there, and I think I've got a lot of the detail, but to cover all of it, it's just an enormous task because there's so much. The worst thing is that all of these problems were documented, and of course the executives did the right thing. They called in the Royal College. The Care Quality Commission did a report. Admittedly, the Care Quality Commission report is dreadful, but the Royal College report is a lot more illustrative. Even then, I don't think that we're fully informed about the full details of what had been going on at the hospital, particularly the sanitary conditions. So it's not a full picture, but it does give a very significant indication of the problems and the inadequacy that bordered on negligence that was occurring on the unit. Now, if the consultants were mature at this point and responsible, they would have engaged in some self-reflection. They would have looked at all the information that they had available, the poor sanitary conditions on the unit, the fact they were dealing with higher acuity than they'd ever had before, more infants in cramped conditions, the inadequacy of the unit, and so on. All the things we've heard Michelle talking about, particularly in light of the Royal College report, and they should also have reflected on their own practice. We heard my radiologist guest talking about their appraisals, and did they even have appraisals in this hospital? Because no one seems to have reflected on their poor practice at any time. And they would have seriously reflected ultimately on whether they, the registrars, the nurses, and all the people that they were getting in on temporary contracts were out of their depth and they just weren't an effective unit. Of course, we know they're not an effective unit because they were downgraded, and all of the consultants were aware of this. It's not as if they don't know they were downgraded. They were downgraded well before this was referred to the police, and they remain downgraded to this day. That neonatal unit has never been returned to a level 2 status. One wonders if it ever will be. If the consultants were mature, they would have reflected on all of this. They would have reflected on the sewage, the pseudomonas, the borderline endemic sepsis on the unit, and they would have thought, well, perhaps this can explain some of the deaths that we've been seeing. Perhaps this nuanced clinical picture is actually far more convincing than the idea that it's Lucy Letby, who no one has any suspicions about, no one's seen anything, no one's got any problems with her practice, she's very highly regarded. maybe we need to look in the mirror a little bit. Unfortunately, the consultants didn't do that. Now, again, I don't wish to speculate about why that was. I've certainly spoken to people who believe that being called out in the grievance procedure would not have pleased them, and that would have amplified their desire for retribution. Now, I can't disagree with that, but I also can't comment on it. I don't know if it's true or not. But what I do know is that they were willing to go quite a long way to ensure that Lucy and the situation surrounding the hospital were referred to the police, which is what we see occurring in the third part of the timeline. But let's just mention briefly that in the second part of the timeline, the consultants actually threatened to leave the hospital. There is a moment where I believe it's Dr. Brearey stating to executives, look, several of us are looking elsewhere, so you can do whatever you want. He's playing his last card essentially. He's saying, look, we will all leave the hospital and we'll leave you in dire straits. And immediately the executives are saying, well, we don't want you to do that, obviously. And they really have no choice. They were backed into a corner. The consultants knew that they held the power, and they knew that they could hold the unit to ransom effectively, and that's what they did. And the executives, understandably, weren't strong enough to call that bluff. Maybe they could have done. Maybe they could have said, you know what, go somewhere else, get a job somewhere else if you think you can. We'll replace you. We'll get some other paediatricians in. That would have been a risky move, of course, and that's why they didn't do it. And of course, it would have been quite inflammatory, you could argue, as well, and they probably wanted to placate the consultants and try to keep everyone on side and try to keep everything together, and that was probably the responsible thing to do. But we see the consultants pushing and pushing and pushing, and then eventually we reach the third part of the timeline. In the third part of the timeline, we see the case finally being referred to Cheshire Police. Now, it's undeniable that when this case was referred, there was absolutely no evidence because there are several meetings in which this is explicitly stated by the police. So that firstly means that their arrest of the executive, suggesting that they should have somehow referred this case to them more quickly and that they're guilty of corporate manslaughter, is utterly ridiculous. They know it's ridiculous. They can't possibly believe that it has any merit whatsoever. And as I've said several times, in the extremely unlikely event that the executives are charged, which I absolutely do not expect to happen, I will help with their defence because I've got all the documents. It's not difficult to have the documents. They're all in the Thirlwell inquiry. I would be astounded if they were charged or if the case was referred to the Crown Prosecution Service because all of these documents are in the public domain. So it's not exactly difficult to prove that it's complete crap. So the first thing is the case was referred to the police and they were requested to exclude unnatural causes, essentially. So the case is passed to the police with no evidence. We know that for a fact because it's in the first document of Operation Hummingbird. We then have Stephanie Davies doing her review, completing that on the 8th of May 2017. She says that missing jigsaw pieces indicate that there's no malfeasance. The problem is that the police at this point, incredibly within a matter of days, so on the 12th of May 2017, they have no intention of investigating. On the 15th of May, they allow Brearey and Jayaram to walk into the police station and seed them with loads of information. Most of it, we now know, is inaccurate. The report that they've written now, looking at it in retrospect, which I'm going to do in the foreseeable future, it frankly looks absurd and ridiculous now that we know what actually happened in this hospital. And then on the 18th of May, it's already announced and released to The Guardian that the Cheshire Police are going to investigate. So they're not just doing a quiet investigation in the background. I don't know exactly what occurred at that point, but it's clear that they got taken in very quickly, didn't engage in due diligence with regards to the executives. And I've had someone commenting on the channel who's an expert witness, and they've pointed out that it's not just the medical aspect of this that the police should have been wary of. Of course, they should have been wary of the medical aspect of it, but they should have investigated what had been going on at the hospital. They should have known that these consultants had been subjected to this grievance procedure and that it had essentially come out against them. And now they're in the police station, very clearly identifying Lucy Letby. That's crystal clear, as we've seen in previous videos. They make it absolutely... There is no doubt that they are suspicious of Lucy Letby and they are saying, we suspect this nurse is guilty. We suspect that she's doing something. It couldn't be any clearer. So in that sense, in a matter of 6 days, Cheshire Police went from the 12th of May, no intention of investigating. 18th of May, they'd already decided to investigate. And they were confident enough that they revealed this to The Guardian. It wasn't, as I say, let's do a quiet investigation in the background, there's a few things we need to sort out and resolve. It's full on, tell the Guardian we're investigating, tell them there are suspicious circumstances, away we go, let's do Operation Hummingbird, let's get as much funding as we possibly can. That would be the cynical outlook. I think to some extent they were genuinely taken in, because up until then they had behaved quite reasonably, and then things just turned around very quickly. And then of course we have Dr. Evans coming along in July. He tells them within a few minutes, oh, this is definitely an inflicted injury, there's no other possibility, give me all of the reports. Although it's notable that in the document provided by Brearey and Jayaram, they identify the period from May 2015 to July 2016. So Dr. Evans later claims, I just said, give me the reports from 2015 to 2016. But obviously he knows that this is a period of suspicion, and he just gets the reports in relation to that period. So again, that's another disingenuous statement that he's made. So Dr. Evans eventually comes along in July. He tells them within a few minutes this is definitely an inflicted injury. And then he asks the reports from the period that's already been cited by the consultants, and then he does all the reports. Of course, we've now heard him say numerous times, oh, I had no idea the name of Lucy Letby when I began my investigation. But as we've now seen, he's written numerous reports after the arrest of Lucy Letby in 2018. So he definitely knows her name at that point because she's been in the press, she's been arrested. And we also know for a fact that he wrote no less than 25 reports after Lucy's arrest. He may have written more than that, but we know that he wrote at least 25 reports. In fact, if you look at the infants that he wrote reports on after Lucy's arrest, we know that it's definitely Child A, Child B, Child C, Child G, Child I, Child N, Child O, and Child P. So if you look at the children that's left, Child F is Hindmarsh in the Inchelin cases. Child H, Lucy was found not guilty. Child J, Lucy was found not guilty. Child K is a Jayaram tube extubation case that's nothing to do with Evans. Child L is Hindmarsh Inchelin. And Child Q, Lucy was found not guilty. So you've only got Child D, Child E, and Child M, where Evans hasn't written his report after he knows the name of Lucy Letby. The final report that was used in court, for the majority of significant cases that involve Evans, he wrote his report after he knew the name of Lucy Letby. And then if you look at Child D, Child E, and Child M, of these three infants, Child D is ridiculous. There is really obvious poor care. I have a massive report that I've been sent on Child M, which indicates that it's equally ridiculous, and Child E very obviously died due to gastrointestinal hemorrhaging. So we know that the work of Evans in this case is total crap, but the deeper that you dig, the clearer this becomes. The most generous assessment you could possibly make of the work of Evans is that there is utter confirmation bias running all the way through it. That's the most generous thing that I can possibly say. There are less generous things that I could say, because it's clear that he knew the name of Lucy Letby at the point in which he filed the majority of important reports in his case. The majority of reports that were put in the court case were written and filed after he knew the name of Lucy Letby. That's why every time he's interviewed he says, of course, when I initially wrote my reports I didn't know the name of Lucy Letby. It's because he knows damn well that he filed numerous reports changing various things, various details, various alleged methods of murder when he definitely did know the name of Lucy Letby, and we know the full scale of that now. Although even then I'm not sure if we know the full scale, because there could be reports that I don't know about. But the ones that I do know about are already, I think it's reasonable to say there was an enormous scope of this occurring after the name of Lucy Letby was public. So in conclusion, you have this extraordinary situation where consultants have pushed and pushed and pushed for Lucy Letby to be thrown off the unit and then be referred to the police, even though they never had any evidence. The police acknowledge that they don't have any evidence, but then allow the consultants who push for this to walk into the police station and trigger the inquiry. Then they get Evans in. Evans feeds them a load of crap, so they arrest Lucy Letby. Then after Lucy Letby is arrested, Evans amends the vast majority of his reports for the vast majority of infants that are of significance in the case. And all the time, everyone is completely ignoring everything we know about the hospital, everything we know about the failures on the unit, all of the medical errors, all of the issues that they had, all of the really poor sanitary conditions, and so on. And we know this for a fact because in the Channel 4 documentary, Evans tried to suggest, Shuley asked him this question or makes this comment about how did he discount all the problems on the unit. And the only thing Dr. Evans could mention was that there was too big a delay in antibiotics in the case of child D. And I actually analysed what he said in court in relation to that, and he completely downplayed it. And that was the only thing he could possibly cite. So we know all of these things were just completely struck out of the court case, the whole investigation process, everything. It's an extraordinary picture. It's a phenomenal series of systemic failings and failures. And as I've said numerous times, ultimately it's a national embarrassment. I suppose one final thing that I forgot to mention is that the police also commissioned a statistical study from Professor Jane Hutton and then cancelled it on the advice of the Crown Prosecution Service. Well, actually, I didn't forget that because we'll be hearing from Professor Hutton on Tuesday, so don't miss it.